would like to call the District 204 Committee of the whole meeting to order. Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez?
Present.
Member Aubert?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Nava?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
I'd like to ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Our first item is public participation. Thank you all for joining us this evening at our meeting. As is the case with all of our meetings, there will be two opportunities for the public to share their comments with the Board of Education, one now and one before we adjourn our meeting. For our first public comment session, we will be listening to comments from those audience members who signed up to speak before the start of our meeting. After we finish our agenda items tonight, we will open up our second public comment session, and we will hear comments and feedback from anyone who would like to comment after hearing our discussion and information shared this evening. If you would like to participate in the second public comment session, please fill out a form during our meeting and give it to Mary Lynn Muscolino, who will be outside of the door. We will call speakers in the order of which the forms are turned to. The board appreciates and values hearing comments from our community. Please understand that the board does not engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Finally, each individual addressing the board will have 3 minutes for their comments, and we appreciate your cooperation in keeping to this time limit. In accordance with board policies 2230 and 830, we thank you for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil for all in attendance. Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Yes. Stephen Marquardt?
So good evening. I'm going to start out with a quote to put this in context from the I Have a Dream speech from 1963. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. The English curriculum for our school is being based on Cultivating Genius, an equity framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy by Dr. Goldie Muhammad. Here are several quotes from her book. Page 11, why are school leaders still mandating curricular frameworks that were not explicitly designed for students of color? Page 12, this book was written to support those students for whom the educational system was not designed, namely black and brown students. Page 60, we must stop implementing curriculum and literary models that were not designed for or by people of color, expecting that these models will advance the educational achievement of children of color. These quotes group students by the amount of melanin in their skin. My questions for you as a board are, is this how you view the student body? Is it okay to judge our students by immutable characteristics rather than as individual people? What other immutable characteristics are you planning to use to group students? Height, eye color, hair color? How do you define black and brown students? I can only assume that you as a board support these views, since Dr. Muhammad is scheduled for an entire day of the Teacher Institute Day. Thank you.
That concludes our public comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our agenda items. First, we have a strategic plan update for Goal 3, and I have Director Ed Petrowski to present.
Thank you, President Aubert. Tonight, we will present the Board of Education an update on Strategic Plan Goal 3. You may recall that in December of 2022, we provided the board an update during the first year of implementation of the goal. And at this time, we are happy to provide an update to Goal 3, which encompasses work that was done last year, as well as a look at our strategic plan scorecard, as well as goal metrics, and look forward to what the task list and the priorities for the 23-24 school year are. Goal 3 focuses primarily on staff, but goes far beyond the process of bringing new staff into our organization. As you will see from the information provided in the strategic plan and in tonight's presentation, there are many areas of focus, including the district's hiring practices, support of existing staff and professional development, and the establishment of various partnerships that will continue to move LT forward in a positive direction. Many of these areas are also found in the other goals, and you will see a lot of similarities when you receive those updates at later board meetings, particularly as we consider professional development and partnerships with outside organizations.
Just a real quick note, what you're seeing on the screen is the exact same thing that's in your packet.
Goal 3's main focus is to invest in staff and culture to ensure innovation, collaboration, and accountability. We believe that this can be achieved by focusing on two main strategies within the goal: enhancing staff satisfaction, innovation, and campus unity through engagement, collaboration, voice, and professional development, as well as by attracting, recruiting, hiring, mentoring, and supporting strong employees who reflect our community and commit to our mission, vision, core values, and goals.
Multiple strategies. Goal 3 strategies are shown on this slide. We've also included the task list for Goal 3 that was identified and reviewed by both the Goal 3 Action Plan team and the Central Leadership team. That task list is in the middle of the slide. These tasks will shape the majority of the work related to Goal 3 for this coming school year, but we may revise this list as the year progresses to add new items as needed. Additionally, goal metrics have been identified to measure progress toward the goal's success. The goal metrics identified for Goal 3 include staff demographics, staff retention, staff belonging via the Panorama Survey, the percentage of staff with endorsements in special population areas, such as LBS 1, which is the special education endorsement, English learners, reading, and bilingual education. Focusing on the 22-23 school year, we do have some highlights that we'd like to share with the board. Hiring practices, the Induction and Mentoring Program, and professional learning for employee work groups, specifically classified non-contractual staff, with an update to the work that was done for certified staff as well. Shown on the slide are staff demographics as of the end of the 22-23 school year. As you recall, the second strategy in Goal 3 relates to hiring, retaining, and supporting our staff, with a specific bullet point reading, strive to hire the highest quality employees and, when possible, mirror the demographics of the LT community. This table shows the staff demographics for all staff for the 22-23 school year, broken into three main groups: certified and administrative, non-certified, and all staff. Our goal metrics show that there is still a great deal of work to do and movement to make related to the overall percentage of non-white certified staff, which is currently at 7.84%, and non-white classified staff, which is currently at 22.71%, related to our student demographics. But we are proud that we have seen an increase in the percentage of non-white staff for both certified and administration, as well as non-certified staff, as stated in the bullets at the bottom of the slide. Overall, we are proud that our percentage of non-white staff has continued to grow over time, rising from approximately 10.4% in the 2017-2018 school year to approximately 14.05% for the 22-23 school year. We'd also like to highlight our Induction and Mentoring program. Much of the work for the Induction and Mentoring program begins in the spring semester of each school year, and this past spring, we were fortunate to have 2 new Induction and Mentoring program coordinators. Kirsten Bacon, and Jeremy Vertis were hired to share program coordination responsibilities after the retirement of our previous program coordinator. They have both brought a fresh focus and a new perspective to the program and have worked well with the central leadership team to redesign our induction week and activities to align with our strategic plan. They have also continued the practice of monthly meetings for the first and second year staff related to additional areas like assessment strategies that require ongoing learning and cannot be fully implemented in a single session during induction week. This year, Kirsten and Jeremy have also created quarterly check-ins for our first-year certified staff to get together not only with each other, but with other LTHS certified staff to form connections with their colleagues and to meet staff members outside of their divisions. We'd also like to focus on professional learning for classified and non-contractual employees. In the summer of 2022, we established a classified non-contractual professional development committee with members of this work group. We met multiple times throughout last year to determine ways to seek input on professional learning opportunities and plan for institute days and early dismissals, and we continue to meet this year. In partnership with the district office and associated elementary districts, we were once again able to provide school safety training to LTHS administrative assistant staff members who did not receive the training last year. And we are currently working to gather information from our CNC work group to determine areas of focus for professional development throughout this year. We look forward to continuing the work of this committee. As shared at last year's update, certified staff professional development focused primarily on PLC days with various lines of inquiry, those being culturally responsive pedagogy, disciplinary literacy, infusing technology into instruction, mathematical mindsets, and SEL standards, as well as on school improvement days with each department focusing on areas that are relevant to their specific subjects. Looking forward to this year, we have created professional learning community leaders throughout each department, and these individuals have worked with the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, as well as their own respective divisions, to provide leadership and guidance to the PLC teams that they are a part of. Additionally, we have continued the work of PLCs as reported at last year's Goal 3 update to focus on engagement with surface, deep, and transfer strategies. We are confident that this focus will continue to strengthen our teaching teams, the curriculum being delivered, and the engagement and learning of our students. Shifting to our scorecard metrics. As discussed earlier in the presentation, we have many scorecard metrics which would relate how well we are doing within Goal 3. These metrics include staff demographics, staff retention, staff feelings of belonging, as well as special population endorsements. On the screen are updated numbers for all but one of these scorecard metrics. As it relates to staff demographics for certified and non-certified staff, the baseline numbers that are there are the numbers that were in place prior to the beginning of our strategic plan, with target numbers identified by the administration. The numbers on the right-hand side, the current numbers, are numbers as of the end of the 22-23 school year. As you can see, we have a large way to go comparing our target numbers to what the current population of our students that we represent are. Approximately 30% of our students are students of color. We have set annual goals to have our hiring practices and new staff coming on board reflect those numbers, and we will show those numbers for the 23-24 school year at a later slide. We are very proud that for certified staff demographics, we have exceeded that initial target of 7%. And while we haven't reached that target for non-certified staff, we did see an increase there as well. For staff retention for certified staff, this is the percentage of certified staff who return to the district. This measures voluntary and involuntary turnover from the prior school year, but excludes retirements. We had a baseline number of 97.2% and a target number of 95%. That is because 95% is viewed as a very strong retention rate, and we would certainly want that number to be higher than that if possible. You will see that the current number is still to be determined. This is a number that is provided to us through the Illinois Interactive Report Card. Those numbers have not been released, so we do not have that number at this time.
Those numbers are coming pretty quickly. The interactive report card will be public October 30th, so we'll have a lot of these numbers on our scorecard within the next month.
Moving on to staff retention for non-certified staff. The descriptor is the same, although it relates to non-certified staff members. This is a number that is calculated by us within the district and not part of the Illinois School Report Card, so we do have a current number. We had a baseline number of 88.4% with a target of 90%. This is a work group that is not necessarily tied to school year positions like we would see for certified and administrative roles, so there would be different amounts of turnover than we would see for a certified position. We are happy to say that as of the end of the 22-23 school year, our retention rate for the year was 91.28%, which exceeded our target amount. Moving on to the next two items, the Panorama Survey for both certified and non-certified staff. We have a summary for this metric of the percent of certified and non-certified staff responding favorably to a sense of belonging reported on the Panorama Survey. The baseline number was identified based on the fall survey that was given to staff with a baseline percentage of 54% for both certified and non-certified staff. We identified a target of 58% for both certified and non-certified staff. We did see that at the end of the spring collection or survey collection, the current percentage of certified staff responding favorably to the sense of belonging remained at 54%. However, we did see a drop in the percentage for non-certified staff from 54% to 34%. That is something that we are very concerned about, and through some of our initiatives and priorities and task lists for this year, in addition to work that the Professional Development Committee for classified non-contractual staff will be looking at, this is something that we are focusing on with the goal of improving that. Another thing that we are looking at for both certified and non-certified staff is looking at the implementation of these surveys. What we did see for non-certified staff was a drop in the overall number of people that participated. We had approximately 67 people in the fall who took the survey, but in the spring only 35 people took that survey. So one of the things we do want to look at is what we can do to increase participation on that, to have a more to have numbers that are more comparable from the fall administration to the spring administration, so that each response is roughly the same percentage. By having fewer respondents, each one carries a little bit more weight in terms of that overall percentage. So we want to look at this metric, obviously from the sense of belonging and what we could do to increase that, but then also what we can do for both certified and non-certified to increase the number of participants to have more uniform responses across the board.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So this is just the second year of the Panorama Survey, right?
This year is correct. This last year was the first year, so this is based on the first year of it.
So we did it in the fall of 2022?
Correct.
Spring of 23?
Correct.
And are we doing it fall of 23?
Yes.
So ideally, at some point, we're going to be able to do it fall of
Yes. Yes.
That was going to be my question. So the goal is that we do need to administer it twice, 2 times during the year. I mean, is that something that, like, what's our reasoning? Because of turnover, things like that? I mean, we don't really have turnover during that time.
I'll defer to Christine for that because it goes beyond Goal 3 and into many other goals. So Christine, if you wanted to talk about the timing of it.
So we can give the Panorama Survey as many times as we want per our contract. This first year, we did it in the fall to get a baseline, and then we wanted to do it again in the spring to see if any of our efforts made a difference. We have had conversations at some of the leadership team of just doing it in the fall this year. We kind of want to see how it goes before we make that decision on if we're going to do it in the spring or not. We do find that the data is pretty helpful and actionable. We get a lot more than what has been shared today that helps our teachers and our administrators plan initiatives and instruction. So we do get a lot of useful information out of it.
Great, yeah, I was just kind of curious about why we were doing it twice and if that was recommended by
Absolutely.
by the designers of the test, or if that was something we discussed.
A lot of districts that utilize Panorama do a fall and a spring.
Spring.
throughout the school year of all your professional learning development that was implemented. Whereas fall, what month did we do it in?
November and May. So we, first administration November, second one was in May.
Yeah, so, I mean, I love the idea that you're doing it in the spring, because you have the full school year as a.
Last year, we did it at the very end of the school year, I think the last week. So we talked about trying April this year, just so that we avoid May.
Makes sense.
I have a question about the data. So from the surveys, do you know, have you guys classified the attributes that drive these numbers to get at some root causes?
Like, when you're saying classify the attributes, like what
Well-
types of work groups are you looking?
Well, like, for example, I mean, the low numbers, right? Like, for example, the Panorama Survey for certified staff, where we are currently at 54% for those that reported a sense of belonging, right? I mean, it sounds pretty low. And then the Panorama Survey for non-certified, where 34% respond favorably to sense of belonging. So I'm curious to know if you, out of the surveys, I'm sure the data is aggregated and you know, some data mining is going on. What are some of those attributes or causes, root causes that, you know, that explain the numbers?
So, and Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there were specific questions about, you know, what caused your lack of a positive review for sense of belonging. There may be some different questions that might get to that, but there wasn't a specific question that said if you didn't have a favorable response, what was the reason for the favorable response, if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, because I guess in my mind automatically I'm always thinking you can't fix something that's wrong if you have no idea what to fix, right? So if you don't know what's wrong, how can you work on progressing the numbers and,
Absolutely.
you know?
So I think some of our efforts have been looking then specifically in different areas of understanding why. So even like, I know we're going to get to, like, for example, I have like a mentoring group with teachers. So part of that has been asking them specifically and then providing opportunities to build that sense of belonging. So I think we have things in different areas that are going, because we've received, you know, so what does belonging mean? So we've been going back and asking, even for ourselves in leadership, how, and then implementing like actionable items so that we can begin to address it in many different ways. And hopefully, again, when we get our data, that we will begin to see that. So that goes from our leadership opportunities, because that we've created different touches for our communication. So there's been so many things that have that define kind of that sense of belonging. And so for us, in many different ways, we've been looking at addressing that. So hopefully, for each of us, how we, across the district, how we've been addressing that, hopefully we will begin to see more change. So part of it has been asking what belonging means, and then how then do we reshape that culture. And so I hope that is kind of getting it.
Sure. I mean, I guess this is one data point, if you will, right? I mean, sort of what I'm gathering.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just got some, the Panorama Survey, so we do in our district similar kind of survey. We don't do it for staff. So that's interesting that you do that and the results that you get. But I also know when we survey for students' sense of belonging, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the student results for sense of belonging also was probably one of the ones that we're focusing on, because that is one that we have a tendency of seeing lower numbers. I know we do, and I seem to remember that we had a similar outlook at for our students for sense of belonging. Is that fair to say? Do you remember?
It was stronger than our
staff, for sure, right? But it was, I thought it was one of the ones that we wanted to focus on. So I guess my question is, for sense of belonging on the student side, or any of them, really any of the competency areas, you can rank that against national norms on the student side. Can you do that also for staff? And if so, do you know where we are in terms of national ranking?
I don't know the answer
Do you
to
have
that,
those norms,
Do you
Christine?
know if that's something that can be normed against national?
I was just actually going to look at our student.
There are norms for staff.
I was curious about that too, Tim, because, you know, obviously we don't exist in a vacuum, so what's
Right.
on around us too, to kind of get a sense of.
Okay, so I was mistaken. There are norms for the staff benchmarks, so we can get an idea of where we are nationally. I would want to look at their sample pool to know if we're being compared to other like
Yep.
districts. That's
Yeah.
not something that I have readily available that I can look at.
Yeah, it would just be something interesting to look at, because I think in high school in general, I think our students at least what I've investigated, not only in our district, but other districts, that sense of belonging at the high school age seems to be something that's lower. And it's interesting that we see the same kind of thing for our staff. Sorry, last question. Is that the only competency area that we assess staff in, is sense of belonging, or do we do other ones?
There are other ones. There was a question that I know that is relevant to my area as well, talking about staff, the percentage of staff that view feedback from like our professional appraisal system or feedback that they're getting from their colleagues, from their supervisors as positive. We're using that data to help shape revisions to our professional appraisal oversight committee, or to our professional appraisal system. But as it relates to our goal metrics, this is the only one that's part of our goal metrics.
So you do other competency areas that are nationally normed throughout?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the Panorama Survey, sense of belonging and diversity and inclusion occur in Goal 2 as well.
Yep.
So we use Panorama Survey throughout our strategic plan.
That's great.
Yeah, that would be great to understand the
norms.
possibility of the norms.
Yep.
Because we can't even, at this point, we haven't even
1 year.
done the test for a full year.
Right.
So we can't even ascertain, I mean, by looking at the number, it seems low, but if that's, what, on a national, or we're still want to improve it, but that would give us a comparison set.
So we can get more information around the norming of Panorama, get it back to the board.
Thank you.
And then finally, the last scorecard metric would be special population endorsements. This is the percentage of staff that hold an LBS 1, which again is the endorsement to teach within a special education department or curriculum. EL, which is English learners, reading specialists, or bilingual content endorsements. At the time of the determination of these goal metrics, our baseline was 16.8%, and we had set a target of 20%. We are happy to announce that at the end of the 22-23 school year, while we didn't quite hit that goal, we came very close. We were at 19.27% of our staff holding one of those special population endorsements. We do anticipate that this number will continue to grow. As you recall, we have increased different supported programs within the school, namely the expansion of our bilingual program, the expansion of our co-teaching program. And while we certainly welcome and appreciate the number of staff that hold those endorsements, we are always looking to increase the number of staff that hold multiple endorsements. So that would be staff that hold, for instance, if I was still teaching a math endorsement and that would go back and get an EL endorsement or an LBS 1. You may recall from different initiatives that we've had, we've tried to work through that to provide some structure for staff members to go back and get additional endorsements as well. So we are optimistic that this number will continue to grow.
I'm sorry. So for the staff, the percentage of staff holding it, if like they held 2 endorsements, they wouldn't count as twice?
It would not count twice.
Okay, so if they hold 3 endorsements, it's still 1 staff?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we do have some staff members who have an LBS 1 as well as a reading specialist or an LBS 1 and EL, so that would still count as one person on that percentage.
It's not the amount of endorsements, it's...
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's percentage of staff, absolutely. Earlier in this presentation, when we had the slide that showed the strategies as well as the focus areas for this year, you could see there was an exhaustive list. We would like to focus on 4 key focus areas for 23-24 to discuss tonight. One is the review and revision of our certified professional appraisal system. Another is the expansion of professional development for paraeducators. This is very similar to the committee that we established last year for classified non-contractual staff members. We'd like to talk briefly about the district onboarding committee, which is just getting going. And then finally, hiring practice and the creation of Affinity Spaces that Dr. Rowe will talk about at the end of this presentation. Related to our professional appraisal system review, We have a professional appraisal system that has been in place since the early 2000s. During that time, best practice in teaching and learning has changed, as have our practices and supports. We've implemented professional learning communities in that time, a co-teaching model, various instructional coaching, and this year, our new bilingual program model. And we're hopeful that this revised model for our professional appraisal system will reflect our change in practice and create a system that provides valuable and effective feedback for our certified staff. As I mentioned earlier, one of the areas within the Panorama Survey talks about the value of feedback that is received through our evaluation system, and that is something that we are certainly looking to strengthen, and we want staff to view an appraisal system as something that is valuable to them. So we are taking that information and keeping that at the forefront of our conversations when we are talking about what to include in our model, and if there are any areas that we could redesign or remove. One of the things that's important to know is over this time there have been changes to state requirements and plan design, and so while some of these changes have been, initiated by some changes to state requirements, we also know that it is time for us to review our plan and make some needed changes moving forward. We had talked previously about the establishment of a professional development committee for classified non-contractual staff members. This year, actually this past summer, we established a very similar group for paraeducator staff. Over the course of the summer, Dr. Owens, Dr. Moore, myself, and members of our paraeducator work group met to discuss professional development, some areas of focus that they would like us to work towards, and some different times and topics for which during which to do so. We identified some work that could be done during both PLC and school improvement days, as well as institute days. Those include meetings with special education or program teams, ongoing training in crisis prevention intervention, which is CPI training, which just took place last week, and there's additional training that is ongoing. Specific division and department meetings for non-special education staff, as well as mandated compliance training throughout the year through the state of Illinois. Dr. Owens has also worked to create a partnership with West 40 and one of their trainers to provide training for our paraeducators at the opening of School Institute Day, and we are looking to have him come back out and provide additional training for our paraeducator staff, so that way we can hopefully provide them the training and resources that they are looking to have to better support them in their roles here as paraeducators at Lyons Township High School.
And like prior to this, like last year, we really didn't have much or a really robust program for PLC for paraeducators.
Not for PLCs. This has been part of ongoing discussion, providing professional development for our non-certified work groups. A lot of their roles are very different, so it's difficult to provide one-size-fits-all training for any work group, but especially for some of the classified non-contractual staff and paraeducator staff. So while there was professional development, it wasn't up to the level that we would want it to be. So we are excited to continue to move forward.
I really, really appreciate that, that you're able to do that. And I think it's a large enough and a significant group that, contributes greatly to our students' daily lives. So I think this gives them that support.
Absolutely.
And the same kind of training and that we provide to our other staff members. So I really appreciate that you're doing that and continue to do that. And I guess my only other question then is, so, and forgive me if I should know this, but for with the school improvement days that we've had, have the paras typically then been dismissed and not been a part
No,
of
they're in
those days?
attendance for those
They
days.
are. Well, I get it for now, for this, but were they always in attendance?
They have been. Their contract is a little bit different than the certified staff, so typically there is one institute day that they're not in attendance for because it's a different number of days. That has typically been the October Institute Day, but for the school improvement days, they have been there. So they have had some sort of professional development opportunity or some ongoing training work with their areas during those school improvement day afternoons.
So they won't be here Friday for the Institute Day.
That's what okay.
And as far as the late start date, they have PLC time during this.
There is PLC time. That has been an ongoing discussion as to what types of activities and ongoing training we can provide for them. Because of the nature of those roles, it's a little bit different. They aren't in PLC teaching teams like our certified staff has been, so that has been a topic of discussion that Dr. Owens and Dr. Moore and Dr. Waterman and I have been talking about, what type of ongoing support we can provide to them and what would be appropriate.
The August 16th training that Ed talked about was provided by West 40. It was a Paraeducator 101 course, and we received really good feedback from paraeducators. So that was a result of the discussions this summer, and paras providing input into the types of sessions and learning they want to engage in.
So if they raised their hand and said they wanted to be at the Friday session, is that something that we would consider?
Well, we've taken that into consideration, and so any training that's provided on Friday that would be relevant to paraeducators, we have implemented a method for them to receive that training as well, too. So they certainly wouldn't be at a loss of any of that training, or for any of that training.
When we do institute days and some of the scheduled professional development, do we do a formal survey of everyone at the end of those days?
I'd like to get feedback on the, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, we
that's
do.
another data point that
Yes.
that we utilize when we're
That helps to shape future Institute Day presentations, topics of conversation, for consideration as well.
And then one question about the appraisal system review. Is there a multidisciplinary work group that is looking at that appraisal?
So this is specifically for our certified staff. So that we do have a professional appraisal oversight committee that has been a long-standing committee within the school district. It contains administrative staff members, but it also contains staff members from various divisions and departments throughout the teaching
Half and
force.
half, right?
It is half and half,
association
right?
representation, half leadership representation.
And we have staff members who are certified teachers. We also have staff members who are certified support personnel, social workers, counselors, positions in that as well.
So as you're moving along in this, you not only have those people at the table, but also I imagine that the LTA
Correct.
is going to be taking that.
Yes.
Correct.
You're considering all the touch
Yes.
points.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a big undertaking.
Yeah, that's the definition of a collaborative process.
Yes. And it has been a very, very strong working group.
Sorry, and I had a follow-up to that, because that was one of my questions, too. Is the framework that you guys are using, are you following Danielson?
Yeah.
That's part of it. So it's adapted, I'm assuming, since 2000. It's the framework in and of itself.
Correct.
But the model that you're using, or the tools, I guess, that you're using have adapted over the years.
That is correct. So the model that we have is not the exact same model that we did have in the early 2000s. It certainly evolved over time. The Charlotte Danielson framework that is being referred to is a framework for teaching that is very common in schools for evaluative purposes. In fact, it was adopted by the state of Illinois for their sample evaluation plan for certified staff. It breaks really, the framework of teaching into four main domains, that being preparation, planning and preparation, instruction, the classroom environment, as well as professional responsibilities. It's been updated over time. The most recent update prior to a couple of years ago was 2013, but then there was an update just recently, which we are looking at to see about integrating into our system as well. That's not fully operational for an evaluation system at this point with full rubrics for all positions, but we are optimistic that that will happen, or the state will provide some guidance and support with that as well. So that implementation of the new Danielson system may not come at the same time of other revisions, but we are optimistic that we would be moving to that new Danielson model if we feel it's appropriate at some later date.
2015, we also did a substantive update with the student growth when
Para, yeah.
So that was probably the last significant change.
Right, the change to the mandated rating systems under Performance Evaluation Reform Act, and then Senate Bill 7, that came as a trailer bill a little bit later, and then the implementation of student growth in 2016. So there certainly have been changes, but that basic framework for our system has remained largely unchanged.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to touch briefly, as we're talking about professional learning for paraeducators, that one of the things that we're also looking to do this year is the implementation of an onboarding committee. And we talked before about the induction and mentoring program for certified staff. And it's not uncommon for school districts to have similar programs for certified staff. Generally speaking, when we are talking about bringing new certified staff into a school district, we have the benefit of having those staff members all starting about the same time. They're generally all starting for the start of a school year. So that affords school districts the opportunity to have an induction week or time for them to come in for orientation over the summer, to work together, to get to know the school district and get to know different different district initiatives, some different programs, in this case, learn about our strategic plan. When I was talking about certified and non-certified staff retention, I alluded to the fact that with non-certified staff, that's much more of an ongoing calendar. It's a rolling calendar. We don't have a general start date for all non-certified staff and an end date at the end of a school year. We will have staff members that will begin with us during the school year and may leave from us during the school year for a variety of reasons. So creating a formal induction and mentoring program that brings everybody together for a fixed amount of time is much more difficult, because we might not have many people at that time, we might not have anybody at that time who's coming in based on the life cycle of that particular employee. But what we wanted to do is establish a district onboarding committee that goes beyond looking at, the paperwork and logistics of bringing people on board. Those are things that are generally handled in my office in conjunction with different areas like technology or the divisional office. We're talking about more of the support of a new staff member that our certified staff might get through the induction and mentoring program that a non-certified staff member might not have, because there isn't that formal program and that formal amount of time that's generally allotted to doing that, because we don't have the benefit of knowing when people are going to come on board. So we are excited about that. We have staff members from various work groups that are going to be part of that committee, and we are excited about the work that committee is going to do to help with that and help support our staff coming on board regardless of what work group they are. So not a lot to report on that, but at a future update, we'll certainly be able to provide the district more information about that.
I think it's a great idea. I do.
On the slide right now is the hiring data for all new staff. We had talked earlier when we showed the metrics that for our staff demographics, we knew that there was a long way to go in order to have the percentage of our staff essentially reflect the communities that we serve and the population of students that we serve. But we had set those interim targets each year of having our new hires data, our new hire demographics, more accurately reflect or match those of the students that we serve. On the screen is the hiring data as of a week ago for all of our certified/administrative staff, non-certified staff, and then all staff combined, in comparison to students. Now you'll notice the asterisk by the students. This is from the Illinois Interactive Report Card. Again, this is from the last published report card. We don't have the updated numbers that will come out at the end of October, so this is the last published. Students, we are always working, I guess, in a year in arrears with that, but that's the most accurate data that we can use for our students. Looking at certified and administrative at the categories of white, black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, you'll see the breakdown of our percentages. We had 30 certified or administrative staff that came on board, 70% being white, 10% black, 16.67% identifying as Hispanic Latinx, and then 3.33% Asian Pacific Islander. Looking at non-certified staff, we had 14 staff members. Those are the percentages. All of our staff members either were from in the category of white or in Hispanic. And then all of our new staff on board, those 44 staff members, gives you a percentage of 70.46%, 6.82%, 20.45%, and 2.27%. Comparing that to where our students are, we know we didn't quite hit the targets for all of them, but we have come very close, closer than we certainly have in previous years, and that's something that I feel we should celebrate. That is not something that is done through my office in a vacuum. That is certainly something that starts from a lot of different places, and I want to thank Dr. Rowe for all of her efforts with that. One of the things that we have implemented, and this is because of her initiative, is putting in an interrupting bias in the hiring process training that we have for all of our certified interview processes. And over the course of last year, we had a little over 15% of our certified staff participate in those those trainings, which is great. Those trainings provide staff with an understanding of unconscious bias, an understanding of how to combat it, especially as it's related to the hiring process, but even more importantly, how to combat it in all other areas that they might be working with other people, students, staff members in the community, you name it. In fact, that's something that we are expanding to all staff through presentations and workshops at Institute Days over the course of this school year as well, because we know that it's valuable information. And so that also, my thanks also goes to everyone in all the divisional offices, the building offices who have really focused on that and our efforts to make sure that we have a staff that is representative of the communities that we serve. So while we acknowledge there is a long way to go, we are also very optimistic that we are making those gains to get there.
I had a question, but I just wanted to comment that in the first year with this data, this is great steps in the right direction.
Thank you.
So thank you. Everything that you just said, that's great news, and I love hearing all of the trainings that are in place. I'm curious about our student population too, because I know there are fluctuations and some populations have more growth than others. Do we have a sense, and it's a little separate from HR related, but do we have a sense of like any projections with our student breakdown at all, like 5 years from now?
That's a really good question. We have the historical data of how we've evolved, but not like projections.
Okay.
Although I will say that my understanding is that there's two organizations, Community Memorial Foundation and Healthy Families Foundation, that have collaborated on a study of the growing Latino population in the western suburbs, and we're meeting with them next week. They're going to present that to us. So it's possible that we might learn more from the study that they did. But in terms of enrollment projections demographically, I've not had anything come across that would share that.
Is that anything that we've ever done or would do? I mean, this is
like even I'm thinking like the SARTA report that the board did
That's what
last
I
year didn't have it broke down by demographics
Yeah.
or anything. So I'll put that on the list and see if there is a group out there that does that type of work.
And then finally tonight, we did want to talk, and Dr. Rowe can certainly talk more about this, about the expansion of the LTHS Affinity Spaces. This has been in partnership with the Illinois State Board of Education, and right now LT is one of 46 affinity groups associated with the Illinois State Board of Education and the Teach Plus initiative in the Illinois Affinity Group Network. The focus of this work is on supporting the retention, the professional development, and the overall sense of belonging for our staff members of color. So Dr. Rowe, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add to that about the work. Dr. Rowe is also one of our Affinity Space leaders with the state, and so we're fortunate to have her with us on our staff to be able to provide that guidance and leadership to us as well.
I think the biggest piece that I would add is that obviously Illinois State Board of Education has been concerned about having teachers, and I think all of us are concerned about that in general, and also how are we supporting educators of color that are entering into the field. They have a much higher rate of leaving the profession, and so because of that, with the concerns we have for having teachers not just come but remain in the profession, that is the mentorship that they're asking districts to do, in particular for that population that is at such risk of leaving. And we know that the benefits for students to have, in particular, like if you were looking at African American students, for example, we know if they have just one black teacher, that their chances of finishing school and graduating high school and going to college increases, and if they have two, it doubles. So there's just so much data out there speaking to that, but the folks that are in the classroom are not mirroring our students. So this is just one small effort, again, to support that work. And again, we want to mentor all of our teachers. So there's so many ways that we're doing that in our district, and this is just another particular way that's really looking at some of our teachers and their needs. So it's been a real joy, and I'm really thankful for our district being very supportive of that work.
That's fantastic. Can you tell us what, so is our work with us here at LT, or are we pushing support at the college college level? Like, what does it look like? What is that?
So what we're doing, basically, ISB has made this a part, because this is in their strategic plan. And so from their strategic plan, this was pushed out to support across the whole entire state. And so they have a network where there are mentors. So I have a mentor that I work with. She actually comes and does things here at LT. And so we get together and have training. So we get to, technology is amazing. So they provide spaces for us to learn and grow and have resources. And then in smaller groups, the affinity groups are happening in communities and schools. So I hope that's answering your question. So again, it's that greater network so that teachers are receiving the supports that they need. And in general, across the state, we're looking at many different, buckets, so to speak, of how are we supporting teachers so that they feel like they belong and that they're receiving the mentorship they need to be successful educators. So this is just kind of like one piece.
I think it's very much a micro-macro discussion too.
Yes.
Like there are 46 micro groups working throughout the state, and then on a regular basis, they get the chance to work together. I think if the board remembers last February, we hosted the Affinity Group Network Series here on campus. It was a whole day workshop. I think we had 5 different districts, probably 60 or 70 educators from around the area, and really it was just a whole day of reflection and sharing experiences of being an educator and being an educator of color. Another example is Thursday, I'm participating in a Zoom call with district leaders who are interested in affinity groups and sharing the perspective from a superintendent of like, what works well and how do we best support the work. And I will say that one of my talking points is going to be the fact that we have a strategic plan goal that explicitly says we want to increase the number of teachers of color in our district. That seems like a small thing, but it's the biggest thing we can do as a district is be very explicit about this and be proud of that. And so we've seen the effects of our culture and of our community when we do this work. And so I think it's just a testament, again, as Ed said, a testament to what Dr. Rowe's doing here as well.
Absolutely, it's amazing.
How long have they been doing the affinity groups? It's fairly new?
Second year, right?
We started when I came on, so Leslie and I actually worked on one together, which was great. I'm just coming off of the pandemic, so I mean, it's just really that just means any interest that you have in common. So we have so many ways, where our seed group is really one, so all of those are
So
affinity groups.
ISB started their formal one last year, right? That was the first.
Yes, last year, and so absolutely. And again, because that was similar to our goal from our strategic plan, kind of was looking at what they were looking at in their strategic plan. Like we have to name it, address it, and come up with actionables to help support that work instead of just saying we need more of this. How do we support that? So it's been a very meaningful work, and it's beneficial to all children.
That's great.
I think extending this initiative, going to your point, we're all worried about having educators in general. So are they extending work too?
They are.
Teachers or college students who are potentially going into education?
There's a lot of work going on in universities, but, and also for this particular initiative, they are looking at extending that work because it was a 2-year focus, and so they're working to expand it to a 3rd year. But they have, colleges are looking at the new, they have new teaching and leading standards, culturally responsive teaching and leading standards, and it's also kind of trying to address some of these pieces as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I know we do a lot with student teachers, and I really appreciate the importance and necessity of supporting these teachers. It would be great to, kind of mirror that.
Build a pipeline.
Build a pipeline.
There are grants and things like that across, that ISB is offering for Grow Your Own. I know Ed and I have talked about those things, so it's just kind of getting to one more piece of how to do that. But that's the other part that ISB has been working on and supporting for districts, again, to work on the student level.
Well, I know we've shared a lot of information tonight, and the board has had a chance to ask questions along the way. At this time, are there any other questions that I can answer or get some more information? Absolutely.
I do have a question. On page 11, sorry to go back.
Page.
That is this scorecard metrics, goal 3.
Okay.
So when you were saying that these will be adjusted yearly for staff demographics, so it's the target that you're going to keep increasing every
Well,
year? Like, what do you mean by that a little bit?
So the current number would continue to increase, but with any goal, if we see a target and we exceed it, then we would create a new target for that.
Okay, so for example, when you look at certified staff, for staff demographics, the target was 7 and we were at 7.84, so what would you anticipate it would be next year? Like 9?
We don't have a number at this point. We would work with
Okay.
our central leadership team to
So like
develop
next year,
them.
we'll see it 9 and.
Yeah, we would
I think that's a safe, like, we would look
Okay.
at a number like 8 or 9. We want to continue to show growth.
So you just want,
yeah.
okay, just keep
Yeah.
bumping it up if we need it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And then will that be noted, that was increased? Because I think that would be really helpful, you know what I mean?
Certainly could, yeah.
I think that would be really helpful to see, because we met this, but then when you look back down at staff, non-certified staff, we're 22.71 and the target's 25%, it might be, like, so however you would do it, I think it'd be really helpful to see that one of them we've had so much growth in one of the areas to see what that is.
And I was going to add too, we have, so the current strategic plan website was just reorganized a couple weeks ago. So actually on that mailer that we sent out today, the QR code goes to the updated website. It's just organized. We've archived a lot of the year 1 stuff and focused more on the year 2. The current scorecard that's up there has all the metrics. It has the baseline and targets. But we're actually updating that scorecard to a more interactive format, and that will be ready November 6th, which is after our, so basically what's going to happen over the next month is the Illinois School Report Card and the Equity Journey Continuum data will be publicly available from the Illinois State Board of Education. We always use, that data is so reflective in our scorecard as well, but then we also report that to the board during the annual assessment report, which will happen on the committee of the whole meeting in November. And then we'll also, at that meeting, share the new interactive scorecard on our website, and then we'll make that public the next day. For the metrics where the data exists, we're going back to 17-18. So like for a lot of our assessment data, for a lot of the even staff demographic data, like we've built the scorecard in a way that it shows the first year's 2017, 2018, all the way through 22-23, which was last school year, and that includes our baseline and our target data as well. So we'll have that all ready over the next month.
So to add on to what you said, I put a note down here. I think it's great that we're doing strategic plan goal updates on permitting.
Yep.
As Dr. Waterman just said, we're going to do the next one in October. I am wondering if the board would like to do this at the end of our board calendar, to have one of our meetings where we have time in the meeting where we go over the new targets of each goal, like goal 1 through 5, all at once, and administration can share what those new targets are, the proposed new targets with the board, to kind of get a sense before we leave the school year.
In December?
No, at the end of the school year, because.
Yeah, okay, I thought you're going through, okay, at the end of the year. But I like that. I mean, would that be an appropriate time?
Let me think about that. So in terms of the appropriate timing. So if someone were to say, what is the time of the year that is the most significant update to the scorecard? It's November. Because that's when all the school report card data is out, and that's when the data mostly looks new. Now, there are other things like Goal 4 has a lot of open rates of communications. We update that more regularly. Goal 5, some of the financial metrics are updated at different times of the year, but I would say of our 40 metrics or so, most of them are updated through the Illinois School Report Card, which would be in November. So once we update those, then I want our team to have time to look at the data, apply some new targets, or look at new targets for next year, so sometime after that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
At some point, yeah.
The point being is that it would be nice to see the targets,
Yep.
new targets, and a consolidated portion of it.
Yes. Yep.
Versus just one at a time.
Okay, yep, that makes sense.
So then it wouldn't be the end of the school year. I mean, I guess, more like maybe December even or something.
Yeah, for some of the, for especially the academic ones, but again, I would want to unpack that with our team and see what might work, but I feel like there's a point where that would definitely be appropriate.
I have a question on the data, again, and this is with slides on page number 11, and where you talk about the data on page 16, you know how you have all staff, new staff, sorry, and then the third column of the data for all staff. Were those target goals that you developed for recruiting and hiring new staff for each demographic to meet your target? So that, or, I mean, like how, what, you know?
Yeah, we had set, because we recognize that getting, currently our percentage of students of color, if we're looking at the most recent student data, is approximately 32%. We know that we were currently staff-wide for certified staff at about 6.6%. We knew that that is a big, a very aspirational goal to get from 6.6 to 32%, and we know that that's not something that can happen very quickly. It takes deliberate action and deliberate steps to do that. So what we did is we set interim goals, essentially saying we want our percentage of the staff demographics for new staff coming in to more closely represent those of our student population and meet or exceed those percentages of staff members of color related to students of color on a yearly basis. Because then if we knew that if we were continuing to hit those yearly targets, over our overall staff percentage or percentage of staff of color would continue to grow. So we don't have that as an explicit goal metric, but that is something that we just use as an internal metric that we have. So looking at this slide, page 16, where we are looking at those demographic percentages all the way on the right, that is the demographic breakdown according to the most recently published Illinois school report card. So we know when we are looking at our new hires, we want our percentages for certified new hire, certified/administrative new hires, non-certified new hires, and the percentage of all staff new hires to more closely represent what it looks like for staff. And so that's why I said we came close in some areas, we exceeded in some areas, we exceeded for black staff members compared to students. We came very close for Hispanic Latinx, and we were right on target for Asian Pacific Islanders, but we know that we were about 3% short for staff members who identified as white. So we want to get those numbers a little bit closer. That's what I was referring to.
I think that's a good point, Elvia, because that essentially, that last column on page 16 becomes our default target. If we do that year after, if we meet that target year after year after year, slide 11 will continue to progress.
Okay, I guess just when I looked at the numbers, on page 11, I'm thinking, is it page 11? Yes. Is it page 11?
Yeah, you're right. You're talking about the certified staff and non-certified staff demographics?
Yeah, no, I thought I was. You know what, never mind. There was a slide, no, it's page 8. Sorry, page 8.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, it has all staff for Hispanic representation, 8.58, and Black 4.38.
Correct.
And then Asian Pacific Islander 1.09. That's all staff, so that includes the existing plus the new.
That includes the existing plus the new from last year. It does not include the new for this year. This is at the end of the 2022-23 school year. And this gets to the point that Dr. Waterman was just talking about, or when is like the optimal point for data. At any given time during a school year, we may have a different number of staff members on staff, mostly from our non-certified staff work groups, because we may have vacancies, we might be, fully staffed, let's say in buildings and grounds, but in 2 weeks we may have a person who has retired or resigned, and so we might have some vacancies. So the total number of staff at any given time will be different, and so those percentages can fluctuate slightly. So when we have these numbers, this is as of June 30th, at the end of the school year, for staff members that were with us during the 22-23 school year.
So, that's pretty good news, because that means that all those percentages are actually higher.
Yes.
Because-
We will be, yes, correct.
Because, I mean, you got all this,
Correct, when we see these numbers next year, we're anticipating that they will change, moving upward for the percentage of staff of color, because we've continued to come very close to those yearly targets.
Well, right, but I mean, even now, because this is as of June, before the new staff
Correct.
came on board.
Correct.
So-
Yeah.
So the numbers don't reflect to the.
Yeah, these numbers are at the end of the 22-23 school year, because that is when we were able to look at the entire year and
Okay.
go from there.
Slide 8 does not include the data from slide 16, but 1 year from now, slide 8 would include that
Okay.
data, and it would.
It'll be always a year behind?
Yep.
Sort of, okay.
Yeah.
Because depending on when we take it, it's gonna look a little bit different. So those numbers on slide 11, that's 7.84%, that 22.71, that is data as of June 30th, of the end of last school year. And so we'll take that same data at the end of this school year, which will include all of those 34 or 44 new hires from this year, 44 to date, right? There'll be more by the end of the year, which will include that number as well.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Questions?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So just real quickly, November is goal 1, which is all academic assessment data, Illinois School Report Card, Equity Journey Continuum.
We're in October.
Yeah, and then December is goal 4, January is goal 2, and February is goal 5. So that's the progression.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So moving on, our next agenda is finance and the tentative 2023 tax levy update with Director Brian Stachak to present.
Thank you, President Albert. So, good evening, everyone. Normally this time of the year, historically, except for last year and now this year, I would present the board with a first look at the upcoming tax levy. So in this case, our 2023 tax levy. That tax levy is always a year in arrears, so that's why it will be the 2023 tax levy that will then be collected in 2024. Unfortunately, in preparation for this meeting tonight, I did not have the final information for the 2022 tax levy. The way Cook County handles that is in the first collection of any given year is 55% of the prior year, so there's really no documentation that needs to go along with that. But they make all the adjustments then to the second installment of that year, which typically would come out in August, in that August-September range. However, last year and this year, those bills have been delayed, as you probably know. And right now, the anticipation is that they will be coming out November 1st and will be due December 1st of this year. Again, that's the second installment of the 2022 tax levy. Lo and behold, today I received the preliminary look at the final 2022 tax levy numbers, but obviously not enough time for me to get something to the board here tonight. And so what I briefly wanted to do is just quickly cover a couple of points with you regarding the 2023 levy. And so, first of all, it's important to note that even just from this preliminary report of, roughly our almost $100 million budget, this is $81.5 million that comes from, the property tax levy that goes to support the educational programs here in the district. So very high percentage in terms of what we see coming from. That's one of those major local sources that we talked about with the budget, in addition to the corporate personal property replacement tax, all those other items as well. But this is by far our single largest source of revenue. And so when we look at what we see coming up for this particular levy for 2023, the Consumer Price Index, now here we go with some more confusing years. The Consumer Price Index in December of 2022 was 6.5%, 6.5%. So that's a measure of inflation year over year. And so that number being at 6.5%, we are capped by the property tax extension limitation law at the lesser of 5% or the actual CPI. So the actual CPI being 6.5% in December of 2022 caps us on the 2023 levy at that 5% number. And so we cannot exceed a 5% increase in the aggregate to the levy. Now, what's important about what I just said there is the aggregate to the levy, right? So it's the total dollar amount. That does not mean if the board approves a 5% increase, that every homeowner, business, industrial, commercial, residential property is going to see a 5% increase. There's still a portion of this that we do not control, and that is the assessment process. And so you can have, in theory, if every property went up, in their equalized assessed valuation by 10%, well, then in theory, everybody would get a 5% increase, but that's not how it works. So it truly is a pie chart, right? So if my assessment was to go down over last year's by 5%, and someone else's was to go up by 5% or 10%, for that future, for the following year, well, then there could be a higher than a 5% increase to some taxpayers and lower than a 5% increase to some taxpayers. Again, it's that pie chart where if one piece of the pie gets a little bit larger, well, somebody's gets a little bit smaller. And so, again, we do not control the assessment part of that, and so that really does matter, though, in terms of what somebody actually pays on their tax bill for that particular tax year. Again, bringing back the information as we will here at a future meeting. I would anticipate in November we would bring back to the committee of the whole the first look at that proposed levy. We would probably expect, as we did last year, an increase of 5 to 7%. Now, why is it 5 to 7%? Well, 5%, assuming the board would be entertaining that dollar amount, or that percentage amount. You also have an additional dollar amount that is attributable to new property. So the 5% increase is only applied to existing properties. However, there is also a part of this where there are new properties that are not currently included in the 2022 levy, but will be in the 2023 levy. And so those properties are outside or exempt from that property tax extension limitation law. So the idea is to capture those when they come on the property tax rolls in the first year that they come on. And so when you do that, 5% of the levy, the increase would be attributable to the existing properties, and then potentially up to another 2% could be attributable to those new properties that would be coming on the tax rolls. Last year, I think we were right around a 6.5% increase, if I remember correctly, which was what was asked for. And again, I don't have the final percentage increase yet from the 2022 levy. I'll put all that together, and I have that in documents that we'll share with the board coming up. So again, you would see, the ask would be somewhere between a 5 and a 7% increase for 23 over the 2022 levy. Historically, the district has had a truth in taxation hearing, which if you are under a 5% increase in ask, then you don't have to have one. District has always done one, and I would suspect that, we would obviously want to continue with that. However, this year, if we're between 5 and 7%, we're going to be required to have one anyway. So, again, that truth in taxation hearing, if you're over 5%, and anticipating that we will be at that position this year. But again, the district has always done one, even if we've asked for less than a 5% increase. Roughly a 5% increase to the 2023 levy would bring about a $3.8 million increase in revenue in the levy, only on those existing properties. That $3.8 million does not include anything for new property. It's not uncommon for the district to see about another $500,000 on top of that for new property, and so potentially a $4.3 million increase to the levy. But again, that's a number that I won't know. We have to, that's why we levy, on that higher end of the, the 7%, so that we make sure we capture all of those dollars in the year that they roll onto the tax rolls. We will need to adopt an estimated levy at the November board meeting, the final in December, as the documents are due to the county no later than the last Tuesday in December. And if somehow you manage to miss that date, it's not a good thing, because the county will not really accept anything after that unless there are some really extenuating circumstances, and we don't plan to miss that date, that's for sure. So that last Tuesday in December is when we have to have everything filed and at the county level. Now that I have, again, this draft report, I can begin to build the 2023 levy by the funds, education fund, O&M fund, transportation, all of those. So we have to look at each individual fund, and then, of course, the aggregate dollar amount as well, and what we project for that new property number. There is some guessing involved here, because, again, the new property number, we will submit this levy in December, and I really won't know what that new property number is until June, July of 2024. So we're doing a little guesswork, and that's why we tend to levy a little bit higher for those new property numbers to make sure that we capture everything in that year that rolls onto the tax rolls. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this. I know it's kind of a lot of information without the numbers supporting it right now. However, I'm anticipating that really the timeline right now would be that we would have the first look to the board at the November Committee of the Whole meeting. We would then adopt the tentative at the regular November meeting, bring back any changes for the December Committee of the Whole meeting, and then adopt the final at that regular board meeting in December. Again, a lot of information without the number supporting it. I will have the number supporting it. I'll have a history of the levy, all of those things for you coming up in November, but I would be happy to answer any questions at this time on the information that we have tonight.
Questions from the board?
One other point, just quickly, when I presented the 5-year forecast to the board in March of 2023, as I usually do in every year in March, we had included the 5% increase last year and then the 5% increase for this coming year. Future years, we don't know what those increases will be. Of course, we make projections on those, but right now, we don't know what that number will be. We'll know in January of '24 what that next number will be, because it's the CPI. We always use the CPI number from December of any given year. So December of '23 will then drive that 2024 tax levy. But again, no information on that yet until we get to January of '24.
I just have a question about what is referred to as new property. You know how you said that anything beyond 5% is for new property, so can you give me an example?
Yeah, so somebody comes in, buys a property in, let's just for simple purposes, 2022. They raise the house that's on there, and now they build a new one. So that property will be reassessed because there's a new building on the property. That property will be reassessed and will come on the rolls as new property. Again, any new businesses, any new building that was not assessed in 2022 and is now, again, new, will come on in 2023, or that does come on in 2023 would be reassessed as new property.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
And we know all those buildings, we know, we have a way of making sure we're capturing all of that new development.
Not a great way. And what I mean by that is, it's not a number, again, that's really shared with us until we actually get to the point of the levy itself. That being said, I do a couple of things. First of all, I literally drive through the community, and I take a look around and make sure that we're looking to see what's new, what's changing, that sort of thing. And so we kind of keep an eye on it that way. We also have some conversations to whatever extent we can, and see if there's anything out there, with the municipalities, anything that we're looking to see. But again, those aren't really all that, they're not terribly helpful, let's put it that way. And I don't mean that negatively. I'm just simply saying that it really is, there's a lot of guesswork involved in terms of where these properties are going to roll on. Cook County also has sort of a history of rolling properties on over the course of multiple years as well. And so you have to kind of take that into account also. But again, we also look at the historical value of new property as well. The district has seen numbers as high as $85 million. That was back quite a few years ago now when the town center, the Burr Ridge Town Center, was rolling on to the tax rolls, and there was probably a 3-year time period there where it was $70 to $85 million, somewhere in that ballpark. We're not seeing any numbers, anything close to that at this point. In fact, the 2022 levy has roughly $20.5 million of new property, which is more in line with what historically would see and really what we would look at and budget for. Most likely, I'll come in November with a number that we would say, look, we're going to look at $50 million of new property and base our levy on that. And if it doesn't come in at $50 million and it comes in at 25, we don't receive anything more because we've asked for it. We only receive what the numbers actually will support. And so if it comes in at 25 million, that's what we'll receive the tax dollars on. But we're better off to be higher, capture all of those in that first year, and then again, we won't capture anything else that is not supported by the actual numbers.
So what is the rule that applies for that additional tax levy for new property? So I get for the existing is the 5%, the lesser of the CPI or the 5%.
Right.
What rule applies for new property?
So the new property comes on the roll at the exact dollar amount of the EAV multiplied by our tax rate for that year. Hopefully that makes sense.
Somewhat sense, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
answer, yeah.
And again, we'll talk through those
Right.
numbers
Yeah, no,
as we get through it. And I have a spreadsheet that I put together that has an actual example of, again, some guesswork involved, what tax bills would look like based on various, homes in the community, looking at, again, what I think is a fairly accurate tax rate. We're not going to be perfect, but close to it, and it gives you an idea in terms of what's going on. And we kind of look at it from year to year, from the prior year to the current year, so you can kind of see that. But again, the new property comes on at that EAV rate multiplied by the existing tax rate in the district.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our agenda items for the evening. Next, we'll have the second opportunity for public participation. Marilyn, do we have anybody else?
No.
Okay, great, thank you so much. This will conclude our meeting. May I please have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.